Okay, thank you. Let's get started. Welcome everyone to this event. Today is the penultimate day of the third capacity building hub here at COP26. And as you probably know, today is the COP26 Catalyst for Climate Action Day. So this event is part of Data for Better Climate Action, which is a campaign involving a group of global institutions, I think about 14 or so, many of whom are here today. And the campaign is all about climate transparency. But there's a specific premise. It recognizes the importance of fulfilling climate reporting requirements. So, of course, it's important for countries to submit timely and robust national communications and biennial update reports. But this campaign recognizes that the story doesn't end there. As the old saying goes, climate reporting is not the end, it's a means to an end. And what this campaign is really interested in is how data can be used to better advance national priorities. How can it be used to accelerate climate action in the country? How can it be used to make climate action more effective, more efficient, more robust, more transparent? And this is a subject very close to my heart and a very exciting one. So the title for this event is The Value of Transparency to Advance National Priorities While Fulfilling Climate Reporting. So to introduce myself, my name's James Harries. I'm the moderator for today's session. I work for Ricardo Energy and Environment, an environmental consultancy here in the UK. We have offices around the country, including just down the road in Glasgow. And for a number of years, we've been supporting countries with various climate change-related issues and challenges, helping countries develop, implement and update nationally determined contributions, to develop long-term low-emission development strategies, adaptation planning, climate finance, carbon markets. But of particular relevance to this event is the fact that we do a lot of work with countries, a lot of developing countries, on climate transparency. So helping countries build robust climate transparency systems and to build capacity in climate transparency issues. So this is something that we have a great interest in. We have a really packed agenda today, a lot to get through, a lot to discuss, a lot of great speakers. So if I just show the program, we're going to start off with a short presentation, a short speech from the COP26 presidency, and then we'll hear from a couple of countries from St. Kitts and Nevis and Sao Tome and Principe on what they're doing around climate transparency and using climate data. And then we've got a chat with a representative from Sri Lanka. We're going to have an interesting panel discussion with representatives from some of the institutions involved in this campaign. And we hope that we'll also have some time for Q&A from some of you, either here in the room or maybe even some questions online. So with no further ado, because time is quite pressing, I'm going to ask our first speaker, who is the Right Honourable Amanda Milling MP. Amanda is Minister for Asia at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK. And she's going to talk about how climate transparency and data is really the backbone of the Paris Agreement. So over to you, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, and good afternoon to everyone. And first of all, just to say thank you to everyone who's been involved in our partnership with the Data for Better Climate Action campaign. Now, today we celebrate success while keeping our eyes focused on the long road ahead of us and the need to ensure that transparency informs every step of that journey. The campaign has underlined our reliance on sound data to understand climate change and also to tackle it. From greenhouse gases to flood threats and to drought risks, we all need to have a clear view of what is going on. And only robust and transparent data can provide that insight. Good data helps us focus on what really matters and identify what works, but equally what doesn't work. It enables us to align our development priorities with our climate targets, to use our resources more efficiently, and to hold ourselves accountable to our international commitments. It gives authority to climate champions and helps galvanise public support for climate action. And all of this boosts our efforts to tackle climate change and to avert a climate catastrophe. And that's why transparency formed the backbone of the Paris Agreement that we're working to deliver on. The data and the information shared through the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which we aim to finalise here at COP26, will have a significant impact. It will bring interested parties together and improve climate monitoring, data, research, and also policy making. And by doing so, it will strengthen our climate priorities and policies and also actions. The UK has placed great emphasis on transparency as COP co-president, recognising that capacity building is a key aspect of this. To deliver on the Paris Agreement, countries must have mechanisms to produce reliable, transparent and comprehensive information on emissions and climate actions. So when we brought stakeholders together through the COP26 Catalyst for Climate Action, our flagship capacity building programme, one of our 4 priorities was to build the capacity of countries to produce and report sound climate data. Together, we compiled a picture of existing support and identified areas where a lack of capacity to produce good data is undermining our efforts in terms of tackling climate change. And that, alongside the 3 other catalysts for climate action priorities of capacity building for adaptation, access to finance, and also carbon markets. We have advanced this work here at COP26, and we stand ready to work with countries to strengthen their climate data and transparency, regardless of their starting point. The Data for Better Climate Action campaign has played a key role in demonstrating the benefits of transparency and the support available. So let's continue to provide positive momentum of this campaign and to keep the eyes around the world on the facts about climate change and how we overcome it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. And I know that you have to go to another meeting soon, so Amanda's just going to exit and stay over there until you have to leave. Thank you for your input. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So following that introduction from the UK presidency, I'd like to move on to our 2 country speakers now. First, I'd like to hear from St Kitts and Nevis. We have here the Honourable Eric Evelin, who is Minister of Environment and Cooperatives in St Kitts and Nevis. And he's going to talk a bit about the climate transparency situation in their country. Thank you. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And a very pleasant afternoon to my fellow panelists here, and of course to the audience and those joining us virtually. First of all, I would like to express St Kitts and Nevis's appreciation for allowing us to share our experiences in this very critical moment on the topic, the value of transparency to advance national priorities while fulfilling climate reporting. At the outset, let me say that the issue of transparency and improving on data management is of critical importance to us as small island developing states. The hashtag Data for Better Climate Action is what I would say is quite timely at this COP, a COP that is expected to be an ambition COP. St. Kitts and Nevis believes that without data, what true evidence do we really have to demand action? What would be the basis for us as a people to rationalize the much-needed finance? The simple answer is, we need data. To support this drive, St. Kitts and Nevis is in the process of ensuring that our climate actions are driven by data through our prioritized capacity building and climate change-related activities. The importance of data that is accurate, complete, and transparent to understand our climate actions cannot be underestimated. The truth is that we cannot implement our pledged climate action when we are not aware of the greenhouse gas emissions of all of our emitting sectors, as well as their potential to have large reductions. Data is significantly important in all aspects of our climate actions. It should be the bedrock, cornerstone that guides our climate-related actions, as well as the decision-making process for prioritized activities. Please permit me, Mr. Chairman, to share a few examples of activities that we have started in our efforts to doubling down on data. Currently, St. Kitts and Nevis is preparing its third National Communication and first biannual update report. The preparation of our greenhouse gas inventory is being supported by the Caribbean Cooperative Measurement Reporting and Verification Hub, local experts and officials to ensure that robust data sets are sourced and used to calculate greenhouse gas emission estimates. This comprehensive data collection effort allowed for revisions of previous estimates in relevant sectors, for example, waste, as well as prioritized action tasks in the forestry and other land use sectors to better understand the levels of sinks and potential emissions. Through activities under the Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory Project, as well as guidance, mentorship from the Caribbean Cooperative MRV Hub, St. Kitts and Nevis was able to build capacity in data collection procedures, understand the activity data required for all sectors, and transform the collected data sets to the necessary inputs for our calculations and to adhere to our reporting requirements. Obtaining and accessing data is one aspect of the process, but ensuring that our data is robust, of high quality, and in adherence with the TAC principles is of critical importance. Priority was given to quality assurance and quality control training to ensure that acquired data met those requirements. Additionally, data archiving is something that may seem simple to some of us, and not much emphasis may be placed on this area. However, in my country, that is in the direct path of the tropical cyclones every year, this is something that we take very seriously. Extreme climate events experienced in the region have caused massive losses of data due to the destruction of many of our regional data management systems. Emphasis on archiving our newly collected data is essential for restoring our historical data sets, institutionalizing the data collection process, and giving St. Kitts and Nevis the ability to continuously improve our reporting elements with every reporting cycle. Using the updated data sets is key in key sectors. St. Kitts and Nevis, with the support of IRENA, was able to make informed decisions and submit a revised NDC that is both achievable and feasible. Continued efforts in reporting sectors such as waste and agriculture has put St. Kitts and Nevis in a great position to consider an economy-wide NDC for future submissions. The activities mentioned are continuing as we speak. Our local team, with the support of MRV Hub, is dedicated to the data collection process as we prepare our mitigation assessment and MRV system activities. I think that it is safe to say that our country is well on its path to being a leader in data quality in the Caribbean region. In closing, Mr. Moderator, I want to reiterate St. Kitts and Nevis' position on raising awareness about the value of transparency and strong data and information systems. Ultimately, this is what we need to make effective climate policies and to get eventual action. Thanks again for the opportunity to share our current experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And moving on now, I'd like to hear from the Minister Osvaldo Abreu, and he's Minister for Infrastructure and Natural Resources in Sao Tome and Principe. So please, Minister, the floor is yours. If we could, maybe about 5 minutes or 6 minutes would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay. His Excellency, Honorable Minister Harry, James, all audience, thanks for the invitation to be here in this event, Data for Better Climate Action Campaign from Partner and Government. Sao Tome and Principe, STP, is a small island development state located in the Gulf of Guinea with a terrestrial area of 1,000 square kilometers with a population of 200,000 inhabitants, of which 5% are below of poverty line, and around 30% have no access to electricity services. The unemployment rate in 2019 was around 14%, and GDP growth was around 4%, which is not sufficient to meet STP major development goals. On top of that, the pandemic impacted dramatically on our country's health system and heavily impacting on our economy, creating huge constraint to the tourism industry as one of the main sources of income and employment to the most of vulnerable. Further, due to its natural characteristics as small island development nation, as well as a large ocean nation and as a least development country, Sao Tome and Principe is particularly vulnerable and already feel the adverse impacts of climate change. Therefore, we are in the middle of what we call perfect storm at the crossroad of emergencies happening at the same time. Energy emergency, COVID-19 emergency, social, economical emergency, and climate change emergency. However, we would like to transform this perfect storm into a unique opportunity to fully establish and practice the vision of green and inclusive recovery, especially by attracting partners to support us in journey of clean energy transition and enhance climate data management. We know our shortcoming, but no one can deny that the STP has strong political will to act on fighting climate change and towards sustainable development under the Paris Agreement and our updated NDC. The country committed to increase the use of vulnerable renewable energy source to at least 65%, mainly from the hydropower and the biomass and the solar panel, as well as 27% greenhouse emission reduction by 2030. Those measures are even more relevant considering that the STP is one of the few countries in the world which is already carbon neutral in light of LUCF sector acting as a significant carbon sink and as an example to be followed. Since 2020, STP has received in particular support from Climate Promise Initiative led by UNDP to update our NDC, which was submitted in July this year, and to establish a strong MRV system. A solid data system is going to be fundamental to allow the national stakeholders, including civil society and the youth, to properly track climate action and to assess which actions needs further support and which are en route to be implemented on the agreed time frames. Enhanced transparency on climate data and financial flow will also allow us to attract further climate finance and private sector engagement, which will be fundamental to finance the sustainable transition towards 100% renewable energy-based development by mid-century. While having flexibility in the international regime as small island development state and LDC, the country will also shortly submit its first biennial update report and is planning to elaborate and submit the biennial transparency report, which the financial support by JEF by 2024, leading the way on how seeds can show leadership to the international community and the proper financial and the technical support is provided. Enhanced effort to generate, track and report data will also be directed towards developing ideas into bankable projects able to attract foreign direct investment and to support a renewable energy revolution in the country. In particular, reliable and affordable universal access to energy for the social sector, health and education is a target that we are determined to accomplish over the next decade. Some small but relevant initiatives are already on the table related to electrifying health and care facilities with solar PV battery system and the implementation of the project to extend our national electricity grid to the poor and rural area. Finally, the updated NDC will support the transformation of clean energy and climate action into short, medium, and long-term investment plans aligned with sustainable development goals, additionally targeting youth employment and green job skills, women empowerment, financial flow, enhancement, and private sector engagement. Hence, despite there is a long road to be tracked, we are confident that our small island nations, in partnering with the international community, have all the necessary conditions to attract and mobilize the correct partners to implement robust climate actions supported by functioning, reliable, and transparent data system that will help us to in the energy transition and the green recovery that the country is determined to implement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so it's, great to hear a couple of country examples, and I think the important thing here is to really recognize that when we talk about data for climate action, data is not a dry issue, it's not a boring issue, it has real world applications, and it's really interesting to hear some of the links with the wider development agenda and how it can really help advance those national priorities. So I thank both speakers. If they would like to leave the stage and return to their seats, then we're very welcome. Thank you very much. And while they're doing that, I'd like to invite a couple of people from the audience. We have some of the campaign's partners and supporters here in the audience, and I'd like to invite a couple of people to come and just say a few words about why their organisation is involved. So first of all, if I can ask Carolina Urmeneta. Carolina is the head of the Climate Change Office in the Ministry of the Environment in Chile. And yeah, Carolina, please say a few words about why you became a supporter of the Data for Better Climate Action campaign. Thank you.
Well, thank you, James, and thank you everyone to be here, and thanks for the invitation for Data for Better Climate Action. In fact, I am from Chile, and we have committed already our carbon neutrality by 2050. And we have presented our NDC on April 2020 and our long-term strategy last 5 years ago to the UNFCCC, so we are happy on that. Our NDC put goals for 2030, like in an intermediate goal, in order to go for carbon neutrality and resilience by 2050. And our long-term strategy established goal at sectorial level and at territorial level. And why we are so happy to be with this initiative is because we need data in order to prove what we are doing. As you said, data is a good thing, it's not a boring thing. And on that, we have a good support. We have ICAT that has been really supported with us. We are working in a program for local governments' carbon footprint, which is called Huella Chile. We also have Climate Promise that help us with Huella Chile at institutional level. And we have the Capacity Building in Transparency program, which is really important also because we have already our national inventory system that we use in order to present our biennial update report, but we needed a prospective system in order to know what is going to happen. And we received that help and assessment by the Capacity Building in Transparency. And that is what we are developing right now. And we hope to show you the results very soon. So great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolina. And we have also Henning Wuster from ICAT. So you mentioned ICAT just now. And Henning, if you could just say a few words along the same lines of why ICAT is getting involved in this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon or good morning to colleagues. I'm really pleased to see so many here, and also to hear the ministers that spoke just now. We strongly believe that without transparency, the Paris Agreement cannot become a success. So we believe it has to be understood that transparency is much more than an obligation under the Paris Agreement. It's actually an opportunity for countries to drive climate action in a way that it becomes an advantage, something beneficial for the countries. And we hear the stories, and I think the stories themselves, they are most convincing in telling that, making that argument. But what is essential is that transparency is lifted out of a technical niche. It's not an issue that can be left to the technicians. Of course, it needs good technicians, but it has to get the attention of policymakers so that policymakers understand it as a tool for better policy, to engage sectors horizontally across the economy, but then also vertically into different levels of governance and the private sector. So that is really our objective with this campaign. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And in fact, we have one more, I think, in the audience. I think we might do that now. So we have, I think, Suzanne Pedersen, the director from UNEP DTU Partnership. Is Suzanne here? Oh, she's not here. Okay. Oh, she is here. They're perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm the director of the UNEP DTU Partnership, engaged in implementing the climate and energy strategy on behalf of UNEP. And just recently, we launched the emissions gap report together with UNEP, where we mentioned that we would be on a dangerous pathway to 2.7 degrees if we don't act. And this is what transparency is really all about, because you cannot manage what you do not measure. We also work to help countries with their transparency frameworks under Article 6 so that countries can really set in motion the various frameworks that they need to have in place to report to the UNFCCC and establish systems and opportunities to collect the data to formulate better policies. And under the ICAT initiative, as mentioned by Henning just before, UNIPU Partnership has for more than 3 years provided technical support and built national capacities in more than 30 developing countries. And we have helped to establish national transparency frameworks as well as systems to track data on mitigation and sustainable development impacts on policies. And one of the main outcomes of this work done for ICAT is that while developing countries are willing to put forth their best efforts for establishing the transparency frameworks, more work is still needed to do the necessary development of tools and methodologies tailored to the national context, and also improve the national processes for collecting, monitoring, and reporting data to the UNFCCC. Along the years, we believe that the work done under ICAT has allowed countries like Costa Rica, Ghana, Morocco, Mozambique, or Sri Lanka to strengthen their reporting initiatives, but also to improve the quality of data in order to prepare and submit the updated NDCs. So altogether, the fact that transparency is a key element for achieving more ambitious NDC mitigation targets and raising global ambitions, UNDTU Partnership is really pleased to join this Data for Better Climate campaign together with all the parties here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's really good to hear from some of the partners and the supporters of the campaign. And what I'd like to do now, I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative. I'm going to slightly shift around the agenda because I'm slightly conscious of time. And we have an excellent panel a bit later to talk about some of these issues in a bit more detail. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite 2 more countries up to the stage and to give short presentations about the transparency situations in their countries. So first of all, I'd like to invite Dr. Jayatunga up to the stage. And Dr. Jayatunga is the Additional Secretary in the Environment Department in the Ministry of Environment in Sri Lanka. And I'd also like to ask Florencia Mitchell, the National Director of Climate Change from the Ministry of the Environment and Sustainable Development from Argentina as well. Sorry, I brought you forward in the agenda a bit, but I'd just like to get these 2 country presentations done now. Yes, please do. So before we move to the panel, what I'd really like to do in a few minutes, 5 or 6 minutes, is just to hear some reflections from your own countries about the situation with respect to climate transparency, and of course, in particular, any thoughts you have around the ways that you might intend to use data or that you are currently using data to advance your national priorities. So maybe, Florencia, if I could ask you to go first. Sorry?
Oh, okay, then
Ladies first.
I'll start. Well, Argentina has a strong tradition of robust data and reporting. We presented our second adaptation communication. We are on a few weeks away from presenting our 4th biannual updated report. And we are also working really hard on how to deal with the reporting of finance, especially because it's something we have to build on. But this COP is about ambition. We've been talking about ambition a lot, and we from Argentina believe that ambition, it's not only about limiting our emissions, it's about adaptation, of course, but it is also about transparency. And that's why in our latest NDC presented in December 2020, we built our NDC on a very robust system of modeling for the next 10 years how the paths will be for emissions. And we presented a very comprehensive explanation of how our NDC was built and how the data was used to build that NDC. But we have definitely lots of challenges ahead. We have to we have the new, we hope we have the new completed enhanced transparency framework to build on. We have to build our national plans, our LTS based on data, on good data. And we are a federal country, and that's how we need to build bottom-up approaches of how to give, not how to build our data, but also how to give all the subnational levels of governments good information to build their own policies, to build their own climate action definitions. And we have to integrate climate data in the decision-making of other areas. We've been very good using climate data to climate policy, but I think we have a great opportunity to use climate data to enhance other policies, other sectors' policies, and that's something we're really working on in Argentina through the National Cabinet of Climate Change, and how to give every policy in the government, from every area, for every minister, the climate perspective. And that's how we are using climate data, not only about emissions, but also about adaptation and how the weather is behaving in the different areas of our country. But to face those challenges I was talking about, we will definitely need support. Every developing country will need support, so as to assure that no matter where we start from, we can achieve the goals. We can track how far or near we are from the goals we set in the Paris Agreement. Argentina has also a law on climate change, and in that law we created a system of climate change information so as to help and support all the decision makers, all the sectors, as I said before, subnational levels, to define their own policies. And for us, that's very important, and that's how we are building data and how we are using it. Putting it on the table, sharing it, making it better with the help from other stakeholders, but also giving them the chance to use what we already have. Through the capacity building initiative on transparency, we are actually working on that on the subnational level, and how to integrate all these levels of data. We are working on how to include better and better information, activity data, and emissions factors being built to reflect precisely the Argentinian reality, and not using just data or emissions factor mostly that are general, because we really want to reflect in our data what is really going on in the territories. And to build better projections, because we want our national long-term strategy to be accurate. We want it to be real, we want it to be realistic and feasible, and for that we need very good, not only models, but also data to support those models, and that's something we are really keen on. And through the ICAT project, we are actually trying to integrate all the data we have in other areas, in other sectors of the government. We're working really hard in innovative and disruptive technology, and how every policy we can do about it will be reflected in the data also, just to have both the definition of policy and the monitoring of that policy. And we're working especially with the health system, just to engage them also in climate action. We really believe that data is not only about emissions. We want to build a system, and comprehensive system, that help us track other indicators, such as gender, such as human rights, such as just transition, how every policy impacts on those other aspects, but because we really believe that climate policy should be in the framework of sustainable development. So that's how we are taking data into account, and that's how we are building our system on climate data.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Jayatunga, I'd like to maybe to say a few words about the situation in Sri Lanka with relation to climate transparency, and how you try and use climate data for your national policies.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, Mr. Moderator, and also distinguished participants. First of all, I appreciate giving this opportunity for me to share the transparency in terms of climate change in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, now we have already prepared our third national communication to the UNFCCC, and we have already identified many sectors where there is need to establish MRE systems, especially transport sector with the assistance of ICAT Secretariat. So we have already developed MRV system for the transport sector, and also it is a digitalized MRV system. And also we were able to assess the sustainable development using the sustainable development methodology of ICAT of the NDCs. In addition that, we have already established for one sector in the energy sector, one MRV system under the first NAMA project in the country. And also there is a project upcoming from the JEF through FAO, that's a CBIT project for the agricultural FLU sector. In that way, we have identified already that to ensure the transparency of reporting to the climate change mitigation and adaptation action under the UNFCCC.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And I'd just like to open it up to some questions. I had a few questions, but I mean, if there are any questions from the audience, if people would like to go to one of the mics at the end, they're more than welcome to ask the questions to our two speakers here. I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, yes, there is one. Yes, please, go ahead. You just use the mic just here, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I'm Aslı from Sussex Energy Group. So lately, some governments, such as like UK government and then also EU, has published their data policies or data governance acts in which they try to open up data and they try to make it more open and accessible to all. And I was wondering if opening data and making it accessible to wider community or even like to all is within the agenda.
Is?
Within the agenda of the UK presidency.
Okay, well, I'm not going to answer a question on behalf of the UK presidency because I'll just get myself in huge trouble. So I'm not sure we've got anyone who is willing to answer that question here. But it's a very valid point. I mean, I don't know if you have any thoughts about this idea of just general accessibility for data, any confidentiality concerns, that sort of thing.
Maybe I can tell about Argentina. I won't answer for the UK, but I can answer as if you have asked me. Well, actually, in Argentina, we are doing lots of efforts about that. We have a law of open data that covers environmental data, and we consider climate data as environmental data, so we have to publish it. We have to make it accessible. And in our national climate change law, we also have specific articles talking about how to do it. And that system of climate change information should be accessible for everyone and should be open and based on that open data law. So we really believe in that, and we are working hard on making it accessible and understandable for everyone. And I think that's a different. It's not only about putting all the data there on the table. It's about how to make it understandable for everyone, for different uses, different sectors.
Great, thank you, thank you. Did you?
Yeah, in terms of in Sri Lanka, we have the Right to Information Act. Maybe 4 years before, it was adopted by the Parliament. So therefore, any citizen can access to the data availability under that act. But not it is specifically to the climate change related data, but it is any data related to that act is empowered.
Great, thank you. I think a really important point as well from Florentia, which is that transparency isn't necessarily making all data available, it's about making sure that people can understand and interpret the data as well. And I think there's a really important role there for the climate change community to do that. I think there's a question here as well. Yes, if you'd like to come to the speaker here. We'll have one more question and then we'll move on.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I am Dr. Mbaye Diop from Senegal. Just one preoccupation, talking about transparency. We have to consider both mitigation and adaptation, as said the Ministry of Argentina. And the most difficult things actually for Senegal, for example, is what indicator to monitor adaptation action. This is very important, and we are working on that, and we maybe need other countries like mine are in the same situation. We need full support to really address this question of indicators in the adaptation field.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, and it's a really, really important point. I don't know whether either of you would like to address the point about adaptation data and information as well as mitigation.
Yeah, it is fully accepted that transparency not limited to mitigation or GHG emission reduction. It should be ensured that the vulnerability of a country is increased or reduced. So in order to that, we have to have a data set, and we want to show the vulnerability is increased or decreased, especially related to identifying the adaptation measures. So therefore, we need to maintain the transparency on adaptation. Not only that, the mitigation adaptation, the support received and needed. The transparency is behind that. What the developing countries, we need means of implementation to implement climate actions. So therefore, the finance received and needed, capacity building received and needed, and also the technology development and transfer received and needed. In order to that, to ensure, we have to ensure the transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe one point to add, apart from what the Minister have just said, is that one of the challenges about adaptation and indicators is how we put such a variety of realities in one indicator, and how we make one indicator to represent all of those realities. And I think that's the biggest challenge when it comes to transparency and adaptation, when it comes to data. When it comes to measures, as it has said before, there's a lot of things to be done, and we can measure lots of things. But at the beginning, and that's one of the discussions we are having, aren't we, about the global goal on adaptation, it's how to put everything together in one indicator, and how not to make it so complex that it's impossible to track if we want to deal with several indicators. I think right now in Argentina we have a specific indicator on vulnerabilities. We are doing an exercise. We already measured it in all the country. Argentina is a big country with big differences from north to south and from east to west. So we've been having very different results with that indicator, and sometimes it's useless. That indicator is useless because it does not reflect what is actually happening there, especially when you put together rural areas with urban areas. It's very difficult to put everyone in the same bag. So I think that's a thing that we really have to build capacities on, because we're far away from an answer right now, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on. Let's just one more. Thank the two speakers once more. Thank you. And thank you very much. Okay, now I'd like to invite to end up with our three panelists. I think we have three panel members here. Firstly, we have Zituni Uldada, the Deputy Director of Climate Change from the FAO, if you'd like to come up here, thank you. And I think we have Chizuru Aoki as well. Chizuru, yeah. And Chizuru is Lead Environmental Specialist from the GEF Secretariat from the Global Environment Facility. Thank you. And we have Ingvild Solvang, Deputy Director and Head of Climate Action and Inclusive Development at GGGI, Global Green Growth Institute. Thank you, please. Okay, so thank you all. So I've got a few questions that I'm going to do one question at a time and put the question to all of you. But my first question is really kind of where we started this whole discussion. So how does your organisation see the broader value of climate transparency beyond simply reporting? So Ingrid, you're next to me, so you can go first.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for the invitation to be here. And I'm representing GGGI, the Global Green Growth Institute, as was mentioned. Now, and that's the beauty of it, isn't it? That it's so much more than just the reporting part. I think you mentioned that transparency is about understanding what the data is telling us. It's about having the data inform our policy decisions. It's about being able to prioritize and channel our energy into the actions that really matter. And not only on the mitigation side, it has been mentioned by previous presenters as well, that it's also data for co-benefits and understanding the wider impact of climate action, which is so important in order to drive the political will and the social demand for climate action. So integrating MRV and transparency is of course firmly embedded in the way that GDDI works on readiness, also for mobilization of finance. So it truly is the backbone of everything we do in climate action, I think.
Great, thank you. And Zituli, how does FAO see this issue of the wider value of climate transparency?
What do they tell you and what you need to do with them after that? Otherwise, you end up with a situation of abuse in information and data. And we see that in the use of statistics, how you use statistics, how you present them, which are data. So we have a responsibility when you generate data, when you allow people to have access to data, you need to make sure that you explain what is the purpose of them and how to use them. So I think the users are inherently attached to the data, because the data by itself is nothing.
Great.
Unless the user is really knowledgeable about to use the data for a particular purpose, particularly for policy making. And you know, you can see that in the COVID situation. We read data every day. What does that tell you? If you look behind that on how the data was used, if you read, well, there are X number of cases of COVID today in a particular location, you can make your own interpretation. So my point is the user's experience and interpretation that goes together with the data.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Ingvild, 1 minute.
And I think building on that as well, yes, absolutely working on the people that use the data. We're focusing, and it has been said before, focusing also on subnational levels. The ones that collect the data should understand what it's for to prevent some of the errors that creep in if you don't understand what the data is for. I think that's very important, and also focus not only on the focal points within the Ministry of Environment, but really going beyond that and build that capacity and understanding for why do we use the data and what does the data tell us.
Okay, great, thank you. I feel like we just started the conversation and we need another hour, but we don't have another hour, unfortunately. But could you join me in thanking the panelists for their interesting discussion? Thank you. Okay, so to wrap up, thank you all very much for attending. I think this is a very exciting campaign. I hope you all get involved with it actively. And I think we've seen there some really interesting angles. I personally am going to shamelessly steal Chizuru's terminology. Data is ammunition. I love that. And when you think about it like that, who needs the ammunition? It's ammunition for policymakers to convince ministers. It's ammunition for civil society to hold government to account. And I think asking those questions as part of these climate transparency projects will make the projects probably better and more effective. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.